Helter-skelter, two words that defined one of the darkest and most infamous chapters in American criminal history. Two words that sold millions of books, shaped a sensational trial, and convinced the world it understood exactly what the Manson family was and why they killed. For nearly 6 decades, that has been the accepted narrative. And for a long time, I believed it too. Then I started asking different questions. I spent 3 years researching and writing my book, The Manson Family, More to the Story, because I believed the real truth was buried underneath that narrative. I discovered that before the verdicts, before the trials, before the arrests in Death Valley, and long before the killings in the summer swelter of 1969, they were just young people in a turbulent era, seekers, drifters, believers, drawn toward something that felt, in those early days, like the most beautiful thing they'd ever experienced. This podcast is that story. On March 16th, high school dropout Paul Watkins met the Manson group while camping in Malibu. Cherubic and diminutive, with dark hair worn to his ears, Paul dug the girls right away. Paul was born January 25th, 1950 in California. When he was a baby, his father took a job on a pipeline in Lebanon and moved the family overseas. The Watkins came back to the States in '56, living for a while in Beaumont, Texas, before returning to California. Paul had 2 brothers, 3 sisters, and was interested in music from a very young age. He was drawn to Charlie and his followers for their genuine affection for one another, the cool drugs, and the free love. In her 2018 memoir, Reflection, published by PEASENHALL Press, Lynette remembered Paul as
a sun-dark boy with a Cheshire cat grin and a nose for opportunity.
Dianne Lake recalled being jealous of the sexually assertive Sadie Mae Glutz when Paul arrived. As she related in her book, Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson, Life Inside His Cult, and the Darkness That Ended the '60s, published in 2017 by William Morrow.
Susan always wanted first pick of any new boys who came around, and with her moves and experience, she usually got what she wanted.
They were actually in the middle of an orgy when Watkins arrived, with Dianne opening the door and inviting the 18-year-old in. Manson gave him some root beer, a hit off a joint, and then told Watkins to go sit between Dianne and Nancy, who quickly disrobed the young man. Paul initially thought very highly of these people, including Charlie.
When I met him, there was no violence in the family, no talk of helter-skelter.
He wrote in My Life with Charles Manson, published by Bantam Books a decade after the murders. But he had his own plans at that point, and after their encounter, he continued on his merry way. He didn't see them again for another 3 months. On April 4th, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Americans were again on edge, with riots breaking out on some East Coast cities. Biographer Jeff Gwynne, in the book The Life and Times of Charles Manson, published by Simon & Schuster in 2013, explained, if Charlie discussed current events with his followers at all, it was not to debate Vietnam or racial issues, but to remind them how fortunate they were to be with him, instead of having to fumble their way through the uncertain, scary world outside. The next day, Mary gave birth to a baby boy, Valentine Michael Manson. Mary is rumored to have smoked pot to help with her labor pains. She was attended by the women and Charlie, who cut the umbilical cord. The baby's name was homage to the main character in the novel Stranger in a Strange Land. Dianne wrote,
"The household was buzzing with energy until things took a turn for the worse and something was terribly wrong. She was in agony, and the baby didn't seem to be moving in the right direction. We brought over a neighbor who had either a background as a midwife or a nurse, and she confirmed the baby was in breech position, which sent everyone into a panic. Charlie grew quiet in a way I had never seen before, so scared he seemed almost in tears. The neighbor told Mary to squat to help the baby move through the birth canal. She got into the position, and Mary delivered the baby with his feet first, not long after. We all cheered once it was clear."
Charlie explained that the baby would be everyone's responsibility. To make sure that their hang-ups didn't trickle down to their kids, everyone had to play a role in raising them. Raising them, in Charlie's eyes, mostly meant letting the little ones do what they wanted. Anytime the family got arrested, the babies and toddlers showed signs of extreme neglect. A week after the birth, everyone was arrested when their bus broke down in Oxnard. Mary was ticketed for indecency. She was breastfeeding the baby in a ditch when the officers found them. Actually, everyone was naked when the cops showed up. After the arrests, most went back to the cabin on Summit Trail, but Dianne and Sandy stayed at Hidman's for a few days. Arrested during that incident was one Mark Damon, aka true name Robert Earl Murray. Murray, a 22-year-old from New York State, was with Manson's group for months, but little is known about him. Although Manson and Mary gave their true names at the time of the 9 nude hippies arrest, the others gave aliases to the arresting officers. Nancy Pittman claimed she was Brenda McCann. Ella Jo Bailey gave the capricious name Ella Cinder. Susan stated her name as Sadie Glutz. Dianne used her fictitious married name, Diana Bluestein. Stephanie was booked as Susan Scott, and Bruce Van Hall, well, he actually used his real name. One day, sitting in the kitchen of the Topanga house, Dianne remarked to Mary that she wished she could be a snake, slithering through the grass, the reptile's method of cooling itself from the heat of the sun. She became Snake, and although other stories attributed her nickname to certain movements she made during sex, this story is the one Dianne tells. Nicknames, false names, even switching names, these were ways of shedding their skins, discarding past identities. Nicknames gave them an amorphous relationship with one another, with a titular head, Charlie, as a fixed constant. Charlie never pretended to be Bruce Davis or Bruce Bluestein, but the others could reinvent themselves at whim. Every day they could be a blank slate. For them there was nothing nefarious about these changes. For Charlie, it was another tool of control. The only alias Charlie ever used was Chuck Summers. Summers was his talent scout alter ego. He'd go to the clubs on Sunset Boulevard and try to pick up pretty girls without success. But he did meet some interesting characters in Hollywood. One was none other than actor Al Lewis, Grandpa from the Munsters. I will caution readers that Lewis was known as a champion bullshitter, the only actor in the biz who pretended to be older than he was, so take this with a grain of salt. In a 1997 interview with Democracy Now! Radio, Lewis claimed, "Every Friday I used to have about 50, 60 kids who would wait for me on Sunset Boulevard, and I'd take them all to dinner. All runaways. That's how I met Charlie Manson. He wanted to be in the music business. He babysat my 3 kids. I met him in front of the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard. He amused the kids, he brought the guitar and he played. No big deal, no sweat. Charlie also bragged that he used to go to Universal Studios, pick up male Hollywood stars, take them home, and fuck them and their starlet wives. Clearly he was trying to make contacts in the entertainment business. That spring, Bobby Beausoleil, dating a woman named Gail Massman, was faring no better at getting a record deal than Charlie. In fact, Bobby was one of the extras in the porno filming at Spahn Ranch. 3 weeks after the roadside arrests, the Summit Trail House was raided by drug enforcement cops, likely following a tip from an informant. This was part of a larger crackdown on hippies and anyone defying conventional norms. The heat had been turned up, not only on Charlie's family, but everywhere in early 1968, wrote Adam Gorightly, author of the 2009 book, The Shadow over Santa Susana, published by Creation Books. Regulars in the Topanga and Malibu canyons suddenly became aware of a new climate of police harassment, which coincided with the political unrest then spreading across the land. Arrests for archaic pot laws only helped escalate the level of resentment America's youth were starting to feel toward a new embodiment of the Inquisition. Days later, Charlie, Sandy, Snake, and Pat were arrested again for pot possession. Bruce Van Hall was arrested as well, which is the last we hear of his association with the family. But charges were dropped a couple days later. Per Dianne,
After the arrest, we still needed a place to stay, so we crashed with Harold True.
unfortunately, a free couch at Harold's meant that Snake was obligated to sleep with the young man. She was displeased and cried, but submitted, knowing Charlie would be pissed if she didn't. On May 6th, Charlie visited Spahn Ranch, courtesy of artist Partee. Manson liked what he saw. There were a bunch of old shacks and run-down film sets, everything from saloons to a barber shop, even a mock jail, where the family could sleep and live together. It would be like play acting. Plus, the ranch's isolation would keep them from the prying eyes of police. But goal number 1 for Charlie was to get a record deal. They could figure out where to live later. He was frustrated. Beausoleil, Hinman, Kaufman, none of Manson's penny ante contacts had panned out. Charlie wanted to be a rock star, and that season he realized that he needed someone who had already made it to launch his own career. If he could just meet a rock star. Thank you for listening to the Manson family. More to the story. In this podcast, we focus on peeling back the layers, one chapter at a time, in order to demystify the family and destroy the myths that leave us in the stone-cold dark. In our next episode, I Get Around. A chance encounter one spring day lands the family in the living room of one of the most famous musicians in America. And suddenly Charlie Manson is rubbing shoulders with the influential star makers who could make his dreams come true. He was closer to everything he had ever wanted than he had ever been in his life, and he was about to find an entirely new way to blow it. This is H. Allegra Lansing. The story of the family and the murders of 1969 have always been more than a crime story. This is a human story, and there is an imperative to understand it, because the vulnerabilities that drew those young people into darkness are not unique to them. They belong to all of us. This podcast series is drawn from my book, The Manson Family, More to the Story, published by Story Stratosphere, and is based on historical records, contemporary reporting, and archival research. Citations for this episode can be found in the show notes. All writing and most narration by yours truly. Theme music is Masked by Silent Partner, with additional scoring from Echoes of Time by Kevin MacLeod.